California, Spencer Critchley, the author of Patriots of Two Nations. We'll get into that in a moment. Spencer is also a presidential campaigns veteran. Thanks a lot for your time, Spencer. How easy would it be to recover those logs, and why are they missing in the first place?
It's extremely alarming. One of the things that never apparently got through to President Trump, or he certainly just chose not to recognize it, is that virtually everything that the United States government does by default is the property, the information about it is the property of the people of the United States. But of course, President Trump was sort of a self-styled strongman, a phrase we must put in very bold quotation marks when we're describing somebody of such weak character. This can only be, I think, deliberate, based on some surprising revelation to the contrary. These logs are, as I say, the property of the people of the United States. This is not just bureaucratic record keeping. This is crucially important to the functioning of a legitimate government, and it seems clear they've been deliberately hidden and quite likely destroyed, given that former President Trump has already been shown to have had a real fondness for shredding and even flushing presidential records.
Is it your opinion, I've heard it expressed before, that he's trying to cover up the fact that he may have or probably did commit a crime on that day?
I think we have watched him commit multiple crimes during his presidential and post-presidential career. It's one of the most amazing things about him is that we have seen what happens when a person is apparently completely without shame and is willing to do these things in public. During the current Ukraine crisis, we're constantly being reminded of President Trump being recorded on a phone call, extorting President Zelensky of Ukraine, withholding promised weapons desperately needed by Ukraine to try to get illegal favors done for his own presidential reelection campaign. Again, we would have to be presented with shocking evidence to the contrary to conclude that President Trump did not commit crimes during the period leading up to January 6th and during that day.
In your book, Patriots of Two Nations, you're looking at, and they have to be diehards, I suppose, supporters of the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, who have such opposing views, but both of whom believe that they are the true patriots. And when you look at Donald Trump supporters, when it seemed to be the truth, and he said, I could stand there on Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and my people wouldn't care. Presumably, they won't care what he did on that day. But if he's found to have committed a crime, does the law then get involved and mean that Donald Trump cannot stand for president again?
Well, one would hope so. And my book points to the depths of this division that I think many people still fail to understand, including people in the Democratic Party, which is my side of the political fence. It's a fundamental difference in worldviews. It's long since stopped being a disagreement over policy. It really comes down to a disagreement over whether you accept the whole Enlightenment liberal democratic order or not. And something that Democrats have failed to recognize is that there is a whole other counter-Enlightenment way of thinking that is much more about leadership, tradition, faith, mysticism, national identity, and that rejects the Enlightenment worldview, which is very rationalistic and utilitarian. And this is why so many Democrats and just sort of liberals broadly defined, whether they're conservatives or Democrats in the American context, fail to understand somebody like Trump. And I think it's why they fail to understand somebody like Putin, who Trump greatly admires. Much of the conflict, I would say, between Russia and the West is a similar breakdown between counter-Enlightenment and Enlightenment worldviews, which, as I say, are fundamentally different. And I go into this in depth in my book.
Spencer, just help me and our viewers along and tell us what happened between Donald Trump and Mike Pence on the 6th of January, 2021.
Well, I think that that's an example. Pence finally found his ethical limit as somebody who I consider to be a person of very low character, but apparently not such low character that he was willing to completely throw away the values on which American democracy depend. starting with the peaceful transfer of power, one of the most important traditions we have, going back to George Washington rejecting the opportunity to be president for life, which is what normally happens in such cases, especially with somebody like Washington, who was a beloved national hero. Without the peaceful transfer of power, I mean, that's essentially the minimum definition of a legitimate democracy: is does the losing party peacefully give up power? And Pence finally found his ethical limit after essentially, I'm sorry to say, being Trump's lapdog throughout his vice presidential term. And Trump, I think Trump is psychologically damaged, frankly, but I think that the ethnic nationalist movement that he leads doesn't really care about liberal democracy, as I say, and sees and is really much more loyal to somebody who they see as a strong, essentially tribal leader. But thank God Pence finally found his limit and decided finally he couldn't overthrow American democracy when it came down to it.
Spencer, really appreciate it. Spencer Critchley in California.